Hello, it's your 705th favorite slime on the internet, and I have a honey farm for you. This honey farm is, as I call it, bottle efficient, which means that it does not require any extra bottles to be kept sitting in the farm, and it will keep running until there is not a single bottle left in the system. On top of that, unlike many other farms, this one will not break if it runs out of bottles. This farm is also fairly lag efficient, though I doubt it is the absolute most lag friendly. It was also designed around not having water, so it's possible to build this in the nether. As with any other honey farm, you'll get the best rates if you build this in the nether or the end, as the bees do not stop working there. If you absolutely must build it in the overworld though, try to do so in a desert or any other hot biome where it does not rain. Normally, this is where I would go over how the farm works. However, I'm going to forgo that this time because I know that if I tried to put any more work into this video, I'm going to fall flat and not actually publish it. But either way, there will be a world download in the description. Now, let's go over the materials. The first thing you'll need to figure out is how many hives you want to have. I highly recommend that you make this a multiple of 4, as this entire tutorial assumes that it is a multiple of 4. It's also worth noting that the length starting from this point going that way will be identical to the number of hives. So if that helps you figure out about how many you want to have. Try not to make the farm too long, as bees can cause quite a bit of lag. How much is too much? Well, that's a good question. Anyways, now that you know how many hives you want, you'll be needing these materials for the farm as a whole, and then you'll also be needing all of these materials for each set of 4 hives. A couple things to note: yes, you will be needing that snow, and you might want to grab a few extras in case you mess up later. These azalea leaves do need to be flowering, or flowered I guess. You can use bee nests or beehives. The only difference is that bee nests look cooler, though you do want to make sure that these are all filled with 3 bees each before you get started. Oh, and also these are dispensers, by the way. The only other thing to note is that you don't have to use pumpkin pie in order to fill the composter, but I highly recommend it. It may seem like a waste to use that, but if you use any other material, it will make the process random and it'll be a lot easier to mess up. Well, unless you use cake, but that's obviously more work. Anyways, let's get on with the tutorial. Wherever you want your first hive to be, you're just going to go down 4 blocks and over 2, and you're going to put 3 blocks right here. And that's going to kind of mark the corner, of your build. It's going to be the base of the first slice, and I guess I'll just leave that there for now. But this will load. Now, you're just going to go over 1 and place another 3 blocks. Of course, if you're in survival, you'll probably be doing it like this. And just place, these same 3 blocks for every slice you want, and it's a little easier to keep track of if you do it in groups of 2, though you don't have to. Once you've gone however far across you want to go, you're going to take your temporary blocks, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then go another 3 with the actual blocks. And this is going to be for the base on the opposite side of the slice. And yeah, you just need to fill this in all the way across. Technically, you don't have to do the bottom parts right away, but I think it's pretty useful just to make sure that you have the right space all figured out. Now we're going to actually build up the main part of the slices, or at least the redstone side of it. So I'm just going to show you one, but you just do the same for all of them. So you're going to start by placing these 3 redstone dust. Place a block over the edge. Even if you have the dirt there, you can still just place it over the edge and it will place it in the right spots as long as you have the redstone. And then same thing with placing a torch here. And then place a trapdoor on top of the torch. You're going to place a block here, temporary block, and a block here. And now this part you kind of have to make sure you do it in the right order. Place a torch here, and then one here. And you'll notice that that trapdoor just opened. If you did that in the opposite order, it won't necessarily open. So now you're going to take and put redstone in those two spots. Put a glass there. If it's solid, it's going to break. Put a block there and a comparator on top of both of those slots. Put a temporary block there and a actual block there. Torch on the side. You're going to place a block over that, and in those two spots place a repeater there and 2 dust, and that should be it. So now of course just make sure to copy that across the entire thing. By the way, while you're building up the extra slices, you can go ahead and remove these temporary blocks if you want to. So now that you've finished the main parts of the redstone, it's time to get started in the middle. You're going to start by placing just a line of blocks all along here. Make sure that you have a powered rail at least 2 long here and put up that block there. And you can put a block with a torch on it right here. That shouldn't cause any problems. And now if you want to save on some rails, you can, or some golden rails, that is. Just make sure that you have one like every 8 blocks or so you can just like skip 4 trapdoors and then have a powered rail, and that should be good enough. One other little thing to note is that if you are trying to save on rails, or well, either way, just make sure that the torch is not directly over one of these trapdoors. Now grab your dispensers and place them along all of these blocks facing downwards. So not like that, but, and of course just go all the way across. Now you're going to want to go ahead and place flowering azalea bushes on top of all of the trapdoors, and you can place an extra block here if you want to, or you know, it'll just make things a little bit easier. And just make sure you go all the way across, and then after you do, also make sure to go ahead and place upwards facing observers on top of all of these trapdoors. So by the way, in the last clip I kind of made a mistake here. This should not be a solid block, that should be in fact an azalea leaf block. Next you're going to want to go across one more time. Make sure you start by placing an extra azalea leaf block here, and then you're going to alternate going on top of these in between spots with azalea leaves and a composter, and you're going to want to set these composters to fill level 5. And here's where, if you're using pumpkin pie, it's going to be a lot easier because you just click 5 times. If you're not using pumpkin pie, however, this is what it's supposed to look like in the end. So yeah, and by the way, it doesn't matter if you have leaves or composters above the torches, just as long as you make sure you're alternating them. Oh, and of course, once you get to the end, do make sure to place an extra flowering azalea on the end as well. Okay, so now pull out your blocks and comparators and dust, and next to each of the composters, you're going to place 2 blocks like this, a comparator, and a dust. And of course, be sure to do this on both sides. And also be sure to only do it where you see a comparator. Right here, we don't need it. Oh, and also know that there may be times where you see a block already here. That's just from the torches from before that power the rail. Next, we're going to be putting in the hives. We're going to be using a little trick involving snow to make sure that the bees do not exit their hives until the area is completely enclosed. Now, in order for this to work, I've marked out all of the areas in which you need to make sure that there are no light sources. If you've been following the tutorial, there should not be any light sources here yet, but in case you did place one in any sort of area like this, or even close to it for that matter, you're going to want to remove that. Now that you've made sure that there are no light sources that can get in the way, it's time to start placing the snow. Simply place a snow on top of each of these lower azalea leaf blocks. And do this all the way across. Double check to make sure that you have done this, because if not, you're going to be living in a world of pain in just a few seconds. Now that you have placed all the snow and double checked that you placed all the snow, it's time to put in the hives. Be sure to do this part as slowly as necessary, because if you mess this part up, you're going to be living in a world of pain. Place a beehive on top of each of the observers facing towards the snow. You obviously would do this by standing on the snow. Do not try to rush things by placing it from up here, because you could accidentally place it on the snow, therefore replacing it. You'll notice that these bees are not exiting their hives right now. That is because the only block that they can exit into is air. They can't even exit into a flower. But with snow, we're able to clear it away remotely, and that's why we're using it. So just simply, once again, place all of the beehives. Don't do what I almost did there by trying to be cool or whatever. Just do this as slowly as you need. Now that you have placed all of the hives, it is time to place in the glass and finish the enclosure. On each of these alternating azalea leaves and composters, you're going to bridge up twice and bridge the gaps in between. You'll notice that it is now flush with the top of the hoppers. Once again, you're going to want to take your time on this, because you don't want to accidentally delete one of the snow blocks, or snow layers, that is. If this does happen, you'll need to make sure to remove both of the beehives before you remove the glass. Otherwise, the bees could easily get out. Once you have removed the bees and the glass, you can place the snow and the beehives again, and continue on as normal. Once again, do this all the way across. Now that you have finished enclosing all of the spaces, we can begin melting the snow. Do note also, at this point, you don't necessarily have to be extremely careful anymore. On one of these sides, place a torch next to each of the azalea leaves. You only have to do this on one of these two sides. As you do this, eventually the snow will begin to melt. Oh, and of course, do also make sure to get both of the ends once again. So at this point, you're going to want to go on all the dispensers, and on both sides, you're going to want blocks, a block on both sides of the dispensers to make sure that the bottle goes in the direction we want, and then you're also going to need another block for the rails later, and then put a hopper on top. And once again, you know the drill by now, do this across the whole thing. And of course, once you get it all the way across, make sure you also put the extra ones here. At this point, we're getting pretty close to being done. We need to put the top rails in though, so for this part, this is the part that we collect from and put bottles in from. Well, technically, this is the side we put the bottles in from. You can have those be on opposite sides. You're going to want to put these two powered rails here. I do recommend using powered rails for those spots. So you want to put those two rails in first, and then you can put this normal rail here, and now put that one here. If you do it in the wrong order, then you don't know what you're going to get, and in this case, it's the one we don't want. Once again, you can save a few rails. Just make sure you have one every so often, like every 8 or so. And then also, once you get over here, once again, I recommend using the powered rails for just right next to the corners, but you can actually take a little slight shortcut there. You don't have to go all the way to the edge there. And I think you know this by now, but you're going to want to do this the whole way across. And of course, put torches next to the powered rails so that they are powered. At this point, you just need to build the return stations for the minecarts and whatever storage systems you want, and you're pretty much done. So I'm not actually in 1.19, so I'm just going to be building the old style version. And if there's a better one, obviously use the newer, better kinds of, you know, return stations. But yeah, you just kind of have it where it's going to go up. Make sure that that rail is powered. You need that rail to be, or that fence to, or the gate to be sideways, just because it needs enough time to react. Make sure you get the rail slanted up before you put that block in, and then you can just kind of do that, and there you go. And now you can place the hopper minecart in. Do note that for this hopper, if you have a hopper directly below it, this will mess up the detection, as you just saw. It'll prevent the minecart from actually staying stopped. So if you want to have some sort of like hopper tower sort of thing, you're going to need to go over by one first. And then you can do that, and it'll keep everything working. Just like that. For the minecart loader for actually distributing bottles, we're going to be using a simple design that just simply holds onto the minecart for a few seconds at a time to let it fill up. First, start by extending this out by one block in both of those directions. You're going to want to put a comparator facing towards the rail and one facing away in that order. Place a block there and fill these parts in with redstone and put a torch there. At this point, you can put a torch or a lever here in order to turn the farm on and off. Now, extend this a little bit further and put a comparator and a block there and a torch here. Now you're going to need a rail, a detector rail, put a block there to extend it up, and then remove it and put that block there. Before, we had to make sure that this was facing that way, but this time we need to make sure that the gate is facing the opposite direction. And now simply put a hopper facing into this empty spot right here. Put a, chest or whatever you're wanting to fill that up with right there, and put a minecart. And you're all done. Now that the farm is finished, do note that if any items happen to fall into any of these hoppers, once there's honey available, they'll actually just start getting flushed out, even if there were several items all in a single stack. So you don't actually really have to worry about that. So now all you have to do is load up the bottles and profit. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. YouTube Analytics tells me that only 7.8% of the first million natural numbers are actually prime. So let's see if we can change that. If it's not too much to ask, I would also love it if you were to subscribe to 2 and H2O. And until next time,